And again, I have to do a retraction on this because yesterday's show, we said that the amount of houses, 2.2 billion houses divided by the amount of sats equaled 4,200 sats. And it was live on the show. I think Craig was the one who was doing the math. And so we'll give Craig we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, obviously. Craig's one of the most intelligent people I know in my life. But there was a lot of comments saying that that's wrong. So I did the math myself this morning, and it turns out it was wrong. But it's not far off. So what I want to share here, I want to share a couple things. This is kind of going to be a little focus and a spotlight on AI and how different it is compared to what we're used to. So I'm going to just kind of go through the chat here because I really want you guys and girls to be using this kind of stuff and playing around with it, and just to show like how incredible it is. So I use this app called Claude. And when I talk about my assistant named Claude, that's who I'm talking about, this AI, this app. So I started the conversation, and think of it more like a conversation as opposed to just like question. Like Google, you'd say, I don't know, best Christmas gifts in Canada. Whereas with Claude, you'd say, here's my family. I'm looking for some Christmas presents. This is my price range. Can you give me a list of, like, it's more of a conversation. And I think we talked about that on Robin Sayers' podcast, which should be out tomorrow, I think, by the sound of it. But anyways, I started the conversation with, and usually I'd go to like a calculator and I'd write out the numbers and I'd figure out what, 2.2 billion divided by 21 million Bitcoin, figure out what the sats version of that is. It's a lot. And so instead of trying to figure out all those zeros and mess around with that and the translations, I asked Claude, are you good with math? That's how I started the conversation. And he said, yes, I'm quite proficient in mathematics, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, do you know how many houses there are approximately in the world? And they said, yeah, 2 billion. So then he said, it varies based on this, blah, blah, blah. It could be between this. I said, okay, well, let's stick to 2 billion. And I said, do you know how many Satoshis are in circulation right now? Yes, as of July 2024, the total numbers of circulation are 19.6 million. So that would be 1.96 quadrillion Satoshis. That's how many are in existence right now in circulation. That's how many have been mined. So I said, so we have 1.6 quadrillion Satoshis and 2 billion houses. And they said, and this is the other part that I want to share, that I actually outsmarted AI. So Claude said, let's do some fun math to compare these numbers. If we were to distribute those 1.96 quadrillion Satoshis equally among the 2 billion houses, we'd get 980,000 sats per house, right? So that's the number. It's not 4,200 sats. It's 980,000 sats. But then they said, to put that into Bitcoin terms, that would be 9.8 billion per house, or 9.8 Bitcoin per house, since 1 million Satoshis equals 1 Bitcoin. And they said, or the AI said, some interesting perspectives. That is actually significant amount of money per house at current Bitcoin prices, blah, blah, blah. It seems much higher. And I said, but 980,000 Satoshis is not 9.8 Bitcoin. It's 0.009 Bitcoin. And then Claude said, you're absolutely correct. And I apologize for my previous calculation error. Let me break that down correctly. So that's the retraction. That's the actual amount, 980,000 sats per house. So it's different than 4,200, but at the same time, it's not that different because 980,000 sats is not too far in terms of dollars today from 4,200 sats. And we also have to consider here the fact that that would be a world where the only real asset was a house, right? So the example that we used yesterday was just based on houses. We took the amount of houses divided by the amount of Bitcoin. But you also have to consider that then I asked how many buildings there are in the world, like commercial space. And they said just under 2 billion. So then it cuts in half again because you're still measuring those assets, and the value of those assets will fluctuate. Some of them might be worth 2 million sats. Some of them might be worth 20,000 sats. But we're just trying to figure out the amount of assets divided by the Bitcoin. That's the whole, it was more so not, I wasn't looking for like a number just to show how, how rich we are. But I just want people to start thinking differently about this. Instead of looking at the fiat price, people need to be focused on the real assets divided by the price of Bitcoin, or divided by the amount of Bitcoin. See, even I have a hard time with this sometimes. So the number of real assets divided by the number of sats. And so in yesterday's example, we just used houses. So if houses were the only real asset that existed, then yes, they would be worth 980,000 Satoshis per house on average. Some would be higher, some would be lower. But then you factor in commercial buildings. Then you factor in land. Then you factor in ounces of gold or tons of gold. Then you factor in golf courses. Then you factor in sports teams. Then you factor in every asset that actually is real, and that you divide that by sats. So 980,000, as crazy as that seems, that you could buy a house for that, it'll be much lower than that. That's kind of the point. So and we'll probably do this one day. I just didn't have enough time to do it today. But what you would do there, and I might have to think through this a little further, but you take all the different asset classes, all the real assets. And so going back to what Samson Mao said there, where he's basically saying that there will come a time where you won't be able to trade fiat, fake currency, for Bitcoin. Nobody will accept it anymore, because why would they? So in the future, in order for anybody to actually get Bitcoin, they're either going to have to earn it through work, their time, or they're going to have to trade real assets. Fiat currency is not a real asset. So there will come a time, I agree with Samson on this, where he says that you will no longer be able to buy Bitcoin. Right? So I just want you to take a step back and think about in your own life, what are the real assets that you hold? And think about your neighbor, think about your cousin, think about your friends. What real assets do they own? Because those are the only thing that's going to be worth anything in the future that we're going to. When everything's repriced by Bitcoin, a real asset, only the real assets will have value. And that's the only thing that you're going to be able to trade for Bitcoin in the future. So if you just keep going down that road and you look at houses, land, sports teams, golf courses, all these different asset classes, the real ones, and you divide that by sats, that'll give you a better indication of kind of the real value of Bitcoin today, the real value of sats today. And when you think in that terms, that's why I've said this a lot before, but I think that there'll come a time where nobody has any idea what one Bitcoin is worth. Like when we get to that point, when everything's repriced by Bitcoin, and let's say it's $1 million in fiat terms, at that point, when one sat equals 1 cent, that's when everything changes. That's when people have no idea what the price of Bitcoin is anymore. Because when you see that moving from 1 cent to 2 cents per sat to $1 per sat to $10 per sat, then even though it seems like that's when people are going to be like looking at Bitcoin as like a penny stock, even though it's not like an illusion like the actual penny stocks. This is something real, but that's how people are going to see it. So I just want to, I don't know if I'll clip that or not today, but I think it was important to just do a little retraction there, but also explain why I was talking about that, because the real thing there was that you have to be thinking in terms of real assets versus fake, and that people won't always be able to buy Bitcoin with fiat. That was the moral of the story. That only the people holding real assets are going to have Bitcoin in the future. And going down that road even further, and I want to give a shout out here to our buddy Jerry Loves Freedom, because he talks about this too, and me and him agree on a lot of different things, and this is one of them. So if you go down that road and you understand that you're either going to have to earn Bitcoin through your time and value, or you're going to have to trade real assets for it in the future. If you go down that road, think about how hard people have to work for like a week to earn like 5 sats. So today, where we are today, you can take one of your illusionary, completely made up fiat dollars. And in Canada here, you still get about 700 sats. In the US, you get over 1,000 sats. And if you fast forward like a decade or so, like that's going to be one year's salary probably for a high earner. And you can buy that with $1 today. It's just math. That's the thing. It's just math. And I think that a lot of people fail to really even sit down and think about the math on this whole thing, because it is so, it's impossible, I think, for the human brain to comprehend that from where we are today to where it should be and to where we're going to. But if you just look at it objectively with using math, then you can see that it's not a far-fetched thing.